to kind of share their work with us. So without further ado, I guess I'll turn it over to Daniel as our MC. And just before we get started, I've noticed a lot of orange out there on John and Boris, Daniel's background. I'd like to see that baseline orange. So let's get more of that. So, okay, Daniel, take it away.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I think that to kick off this presentation, I'm going to pass this on to the other Daniel Norkin in here, which I think that's pretty cool.
Kyle, yeah, exactly. If by the way, if you're watching and you have questions, feel free to use chat. We'll try to catch them there. That way we can allow the team to kind of get through the demo flow, and then we'll try to capture questions at the end in kind of a Q&A style.
Oh yeah, my Daniel Norkin name.
I will be able to
I see it.
Start this.
I wonder who I got my link from.
Star-Lord has his AKA up. There you go.
There we go.
Take it away, Kyle.
Sure. Yeah. So yeah, we had a good time working together. Let me share here. I can't share. I need someone to help.
John, are you on the rights over there?
John, you're muted.
Yeah, I don't have the administrative rights to change his.
I think we're good now.
Okay, take it away.
Okay. All right. So what we are, the architecture that I want to show today is twofold really. There's Shuttle, which provides front end sort of just friendly user interface that we hope to make baseline deployments very straightforward for folks. And also I want to share the Docker Compose environment that's sort of the analog to that. So basically what I want to show is standing up the provide stack and the baseline stack using Docker Compose, which is a new development. We've recently been preparing this Docker Compose repo for potentially for sharing with partners and other folks in the ecosystem that are building using Provide. So basically, like there's a handful of containers. If they map sort of one-to-one with the demo, with the containers you saw in the demo. You have like I'll show them on the UI actually. Maybe better. So then we have some logs spun up here. All right, and so then also here, let me do something real fast. We'll need some credentials here. We'll do that in a second. So what I'm showing is essentially standing up a project for what I would call a production experiment. Let me grab some credentials off screen here. One moment. So I'm selecting a region to deploy this right now. Let's just go with somewhere interesting. There we go. This is the part that I need to hide. All right.
And we should say that this is, we're featuring here a product that Provide makes, right? This is the Shuttle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which is sort of an integration hub for hybrid environments.
Yep. So what I just did was I kicked off a deployment for the baseline stack and the Provide stack for an organization. So like the buyer or the supplier, so really the first organization in this process. They're basically every organization gets an environment deployed to their AWS or Azure account using their own keys. I'd say Provide is sort of like Kaleido, Meta, and Fura, but bring your own keys sort of environment. And so basically what we've got is the ability to now go in and like Shuttle's like a rendezvous point really for for the baseline protocol. You see, like, here's the first organization in this project. Like, this is essentially the org registry contract, right? So, like, if you know, if we wanted to come in here and like Steph. We send an invite. Essentially, that when that organization accepts their invite, it's very much like a GitHub style invite flow. When the user accepts the invite, their organization would be added to the org registry contract. So you see, like, it was sort of checking on the status of the deployment. Like, it takes about 5 minutes end to end to get all the containers stood up. And then you sort of see here in the background what's going on. So what happens is provide essentially takes the smart contract that org registry contract currently and deploys it to the Robson testnet.
So you're solving the problem. There's a lot of moving parts with, well, any blockchain implementation, but with this, we have off-chain stuff, on-chain stuff, different services running. And so this is letting you wire them together. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah.
I've heard I've heard people in the community say that this has taken a lot of work out of getting this stuff up.
Well, I think the benefit really is gonna shine when as we continue to iterate very quickly on the protocol. It's gonna allow organizations in a work group to to essentially collaborate over rapid iterations of the protocol, which I think is very, very valuable. So, like, here's the contract creation transaction that was sent to the org registry, or really for various contracts, including the org registry contract. And like you can see here, this transaction was subsidized by the platforms. So it really it's taking a lot of the headaches out of actually working with Ether. Like, if you want to build, you don't even really, like, you can just automatically get your transaction subsidized using the platform. It's another sort of benefit. I think so we've been working on some refactoring, and of course this is a demo, so something will break and go wrong. So we may have to redeploy here, but that's okay. We'll do that. So let's just do that in a second.
So we're going to want to see pretty soon what the first of all, I want to make sure we're getting questions.
So what I want to show is and really we can so basically what happens is this Unibright connector comes online, and the Unibright connector is essentially talks to the baseline stack, or by way of the provide stack. I'm just going to deploy this again. I may have just jumped the gun. It could have just very well been Amazon being a little bit slow.
Just to make sure that a lot of people who may not know what's going on here, can you help set context? Like why is this needed? What's going on?
Yeah. So I mean, really, like
this is clearly for DevOps folks, right? So
when you begin, like when you really jump into baseline, you have to work with your partners. You have to you have to get into the org registry contract somehow. And you have to run your infrastructure in a secure way on your own resources. Sort of the model here. And
right, and this is for people that are just coming to this. This is specifically for an integration between SAP and Dynamics. So you're wiring all that together, right, including the connectors to SAP.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what we'll see. Like the Unibright connector, when it spins up, I'll be able to explain it a little bit more. Essentially, like that connector, and Stefan will go into this. Steph, you want to talk through that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So I don't know if it's perhaps useful when I share my screen from now on, and we can switch back to yours later.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
How do I? There we go.
Okay. Can you see my screen already?
Yep, we can.
Okay, great. So to give some context, thanks for the intro, Kyle. I mean, to have a little bit more of the business perspective here. If you integrate, or if you have an integration project, and it doesn't matter so much if it's an integration via baseline or perhaps an integration via, I don't know, flat files on FTP servers 20 years ago, there's always some challenges that remain the same within integration projects, and one of them is actually to abstract from all the tech layers that are needed and the tech stack. And this is what Kyle has just shown very beautifully within that scope of the demo that we shown between SAP and Dynamics, that having that setup of all the technical containers in place and have this automated so that the actual integration of an, say, SAP system knows what is the tech stack that he has to talk to. So we have this README file on the GitHub where we also publish the code of the Unipride proxy. I will explain that in a second. And what we actually just saw from Kyle is setting up all these containers, the core baseline containers, providing access to the protocol itself, then a provide container stack, and a Unipride proxy, who is the domain model entry point to have your business object baselined. So all of this was done automatically by the shuttle stack from provide. And this gives us the option, if we have several roles in an integration process, like we have here, we have a buyer, we have several suppliers, and they would all run their own tech stack with a dedicated integration point. So that's what we are doing at Unipride, and what we also did in this demo project is to provide a common entry point for all parties to be integrated and to have, so to say, to speak the same language. So that Unipride proxy, technically, it's a RESTful API providing some basic service methods, some entry points where you can send data and receive data. For example, a purchase order or a request for a proposal in the procurement case that we have shown in the demo. And our strategy or our method at Unipride is to abstract from the technical details as much as possible. So we provided a proxy that can be used for integration. And just to give you some small insights how we do it at Unipride, we have a connector tool where you can select different endpoints of an integration. So in this case, for example, in SAP, we used a remote function call stack for this demo. So we are called by SAP by remote function calls, and we can update SAP as well with our Unipride connector over RFC. And then it's about business objects that have to be integrated, that have to be translated into other objects. So in this example, a request for quotation is bundled in a purchase order object in SAP, and we want to map that to a baseline proxy purchase order. And then we take it from there and can create different mappings to and then have specific code, mapping code to be included. And we all talk to the same service layer, which is the Unipride proxy. And I will just move my windows a little bit to show you also a little bit of code. This is the code that we put into the repo of the proxy. It shows an API that can also be accessed by Swagger. And here you see all the meaningful, or hopefully meaningful, integration and entry points for the process on a non-technical level. So here you can post proposals, or you can get purchase orders that are interesting for your organization, and or you can start with placing requests for proposals. And in the proxy, there's also a small domain model with very with small and easy to understand data transfer objects that just hold the most important data to make the demo case happen. So for example, if you take a look at a purchase order and you see that it only consists of IDs, suppliers and buyers and some items, this is way less complex than the actual objects in, say, Dynamics or SAP are. But for the demo purposes, we agreed to use this reduced domain model to have a common language and use the Unibright proxy for different integration points, for example, our SAP or also the dynamic stack. And within the proxy, this is the last comment to all those who are interested in reading code. It's a model view controller pattern, very standard, written in .NET Core. And the actual implementation is very much generated automatically as well, because it's a proxy. So most of the services are just consisting of a few lines of code, just getting the meaningful domain model DTOs, like a proposal, and then pushing it to the next layer in the stack, which then calls the provide stack. So exactly what a proxy should do: take the meaningful DTOs and transfer them on a technical level to call the next layer in the stack. And this would be, in the end, its baseline. And on the other side of the integration pipeline, there is, for example, another ERP, so not SAP, but in this case, Dynamics. And perhaps Daniel can give some insights on how they build the integration from the Dynamics part using that proxy as well.
Be great. And Daniel, can I ask you one thing that some folks asked after watching the original demo was how can you show how SAP and Dynamics are being kept in a state of consistency? What is the user experience on that? And where do you see in this demo, the real work of the baseline technique happening?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. I think that's a great place to pick up here. So let me share my screen. Let me know if you can see. Are we good?
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. So just trying to be mindful of time, I'm going to try to be clear and concise, but I want to share a screenshot, kind of first and foremost over here, right? So let me just take the screenshot. And I think if we start at the high level and then we focus down, I think that's really going to be a good place to start. So here I have this screenshot, and this is essentially, you can kind of think about baselining in general here. And I'm going to try to tie some of the things that we just saw between provide, between Unibright, between what we're going to show here with Dynamics 365, and then extrapolate that. And then I'll go, specifically into the Dynamics 365 world. But essentially, this is where you can, understand where baselining happens, right? It's when you have your system of record, as Unibright showed with the SAP side, Envision is showing with the Dynamics 365 side. And it could work with Salesforce systems, Oracle systems. We have other things out there like other epics such as spreadsheets and whatnot. But what's important to think is, along with that system of record, you also have the baseline stack, which is what Kyle showed there with the provide shuttle service, right? So
and
just
ultimately,
think about
these products could just integrate the baseline techniques into their products, and then you wouldn't need an extra set of server items or anything like that, right?
That's exactly right, right? So it kind of all folds into one experience, right? So we'll kind of share what that looks like. So from the Dynamics 365 side, from a user perspective, you probably don't want to worry about the proxy. You probably don't want to worry about the zero knowledge proofs. You probably don't want to worry about the mainnet. You probably don't want to worry about all these other containers that Kyle was showing that Provide is providing, right? So what we wanted to showcase over here with the Dynamics 365 side is here's a demo environment, and let's go into the specific organization. So we're going to go into Contoso Entertainment System. This is where the users are day in and day out, right? So what we provided is a Radish 34 module that you can import right into Dynamics 365. But again, we're keeping it simple where you're just using this user interface to interact with that entire baseline stack. And everything is essentially set up in the Radish 34 parameter screen. So when you click on the parameter screen, you point, it's just a simple URL that you copy and paste, and this points to the proxy. This email and password is one way to authenticate, for example, with the Provide services. So you don't have to worry about tokens and all these other things and the keys, right? You just have your username and password for right now. There could be other ways to authenticate, maybe copy and paste like an API key or something like that. But again, keeping it simple where you have some sort of interface where you're just inputting the parameter, and then you go about your business like you normally would, right? So just kind of, I just want to flip through the README just so that, you know, everyone that's watching knows that they can go back to the README and follow along with what we're showing. So here's some screenshots on what Kyle Provide was showing. Here's the screenshots what Unibright is showing with regards to their SAP side, and I'll scroll down further just to follow along with the Microsoft Dynamics side of it. So we also wanted to showcase in a real supply chain, right? A supplier could also be a buyer, right? Because if a request for proposal comes in and we don't have the products, if we're a supplier, then we're probably going to need to, you know, buy those products. So what we wanted to do is configure this in a way that we're using the out of the box Dynamics 365 objects. So you can find that in the procurement and sourcing module. Also, the supplier side, there's the sales and marketing module where there's all these different objects like requests for quotations, sales orders, there's customers, all that needs to be configured. But again, these are all typical objects that whenever you just purchase the Dynamics 365 license, you get that out of the box, right? So as long as that's configured the right way and you import the Radish 34 module, input the username and password, for example, to authenticate, whenever you get this request for proposal, that object gets sent through this Radish 34 module. And I'll share that right here. Right.
Hey,
so,
Daniel, you might want to hit the top end stuff, given you know, this is just a half-hour format.
Yeah, no, this is it right here, right? So we just provided one consolidated view where you can see all your incoming RFPs if you're a supplier. If you're a buyer, you get your outgoing RFPs. Same thing for the proposals, right? So that's just something to consider. And then there's also this service operations for you to just run this in the background, and it's automatically making these calls to the proxy that Stefan shared earlier, right? So again, you're just staying right within your Dynamics 365 environment or your ERP environment, right? And it's all connected on the back end, and the end user doesn't even know that it's happening.
So
if you want, I can.
Let's get into some questions if we can. Are you good, Daniel?
Yeah, sure.
Let me grab the screen while we do that. I can sort of tie it together a little bit more.
Okay. And so Daniel and Stefan, can you talk about what would if I was running 1,000-person unit in a company running SAP or Dynamics right now, what would I want? And I said, oh yeah, I'd like to know that my records are on a case-by-case basis the same as my counterparties, and if they're using the other, you know, Dynamics or SAP or another SAP. What am I going to have to do, and who do I call? What do I, you know, how far are we from – being able to do this in a production environment?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so I think what Daniel just showed is a perfect example for that. A good integration seems very smooth for the user because he can stick in his domain. So for example, like an D365 customization, this is just perfect because you can just work on your purchase orders the way you are used to. It's the same on the SAP side. So no matter how big the company is, in the end, the integration case should look like their daily work has worked before. They are just using purchase orders, request for quotations, and so on, using a tech stack that is automatically deployed and connected. For the next steps from getting that, let's call it production experiment demo level to a production environment, of course, it will be interesting what is done on the protocol side, for example, to support different document linking technologies. So what we did here, we linked the request for proposal to the proposal and then the purchase order to that proposal. So we have a link of 3 business objects, and the link and the relationship of these objects is part of the agreements that are baselined. So you can always see the complete document flow. And an interesting task for future development would be to extract more of these domain models and specify in how far the smaller objects below, for example, order items, they are linked so that you can make changes to documents. So there's a lot of work to do, but we already showcased with this demo that the concept itself works by putting agreements into a baseline state.
So it sounds like companies could be doing baby steps right now, and
of course,
and start working with companies like yourselves. And then as things grow, like being able to pay gas without having to hold crypto. I don't think there's no token requirements here, right? It's not like companies have to sign up to do any tokens, right?
No, in our case, it was a part of our idea to also to have that open source commitment to everything that we put into the demo, like the proxy is now available in the GitHub open source. And if you make use of our very own product stack to have an easier integration of, say, SAP into whatever stack, then of course it would be our interest to tell more about the Unibright connector and our tools.
Right.
But for the scope of what we've shown here in baseline, you are good to go.
So from the perspective of a big company, this is just straight up IT, right? And you know, nothing special, nothing cryptocurrency about this really, other than if you're using the mainnet, you're going to have to pay some gas.
As boring as integration can be.
Yeah, and I guess just to answer that too, you know, from a typical 1,000 employee organization, you're probably going to have a few power users, if you will, that are on the system admin side. So from that point, it's just a matter of just importing the solution. And I'm speaking specifically from the Dynamics 365 side, where that application is going to be available by the end of the week in the Microsoft Marketplace. The system admin just going to have to go ahead and import the solution. And then from that point on, right, you can just contact us and we can kind of discuss what are the business processes or the plugs that need to be connected.
Right on. Are there other questions? If the panelists can stay for 5 minutes extra, at least we'll have that on camera. So if anybody has to drop, they can go back and watch it later. We are live on YouTube. We are at the bottom of the hour. So I'll very quickly say before we get into some Q&A, if there is any, that jump on the baseline-protocol.org website and click into the Slack or any of the communications channels. Ask these guys more questions, engage them, and you could even request for more demos to be done by these guys, more in depth. So with that, are there other questions that people have? There's a pretty big crowd here.
I don't see anything in the QA or anything in the chat as of now.
All right. Well,
There is a question from Trent about this session, these office hours, how frequently they happen.
We'll pause for 7 seconds and make everyone uncomfortable until somebody speaks up.
John, there is a question from Trin about how frequently these office hours happen.
Every Wednesday at noon, US Eastern. If you go to the calendar, we are going to switch over to a different webinar type. So we will be populating future items on the calendar, which you can get to from the group's link at that website, baseline-protocol.org. Questions?
Got to be some questions.
There's actually a question coming in on YouTube from Jason Henderson. Says that this is really interesting stuff. In theory, Baseline could be integrated into a work management system. For example, AssetWorks AIM. And yeah, absolutely. You could use Baseline to integrate any two systems of record.
Yeah, baselining is just a technique. It's just a technique. It's not a product. It's not a platform. Others? Yep. Ralph, it's nice to see you there. Jay?
I do have a question, Boris.
Go ahead, Boris.
Sorry. I am, as far as purchasing, I'm not, I don't have a whole lot of experience in that. So I am, but I do have a question potentially. I don't know if there is a use case for purchasing that I'm going to bring up, but if, that could be a design or an architecture question here also. So if there is a node, and as I understand, Baseline makes basically makes it all the required parts private and available only to see to the peers that need to see it. If I do have a node or a peer that needs to actually see the actual purchases and actually see what the transactions are,
Right.
is that something that I know that in the financial industry, as far as regulators often want to see the transaction actually.
So on a Boris, on a counterparty basis, on
Okay.
a record by record basis, it's not so much that you have a node. So in a way, we have to unlearn some of the things that we've learned in blockchain land, right? So it's not that there's a channel or a blockchain where the node is the salient thing. The node is just holding effectively baseline proofs that are proof of consistency and used as state markers and flow control. But the data is in your traditional database, right? So, so if you are a regulator and you have an SAP system or you have a Mongo system or whatever you've built, and you are counterparty to a particular event, then you will get that record via messaging, and you will know that record has been baselined, which means you don't have to worry about wondering if the other parties in that transaction or that event have the same record. You know for sure they do.
But if I do want to know actually the counterparties to the event, I mean, there are always two parties. If I need to know actually the counterparties to the event, is that something that can be done and can be done only to the specific, let's say, regulator?
Yeah. So if you, Daniel, other guys check my math on this, but Kyle, but yeah, there's a variety of ways to do that. First of all, you could have it in the actual record itself, who the other counterparties are. And again, that would be then baseline, but also, as a counterparty to that particular workflow step. Although then you may not be counterparty to a subsequent workflow step. So you will only know what you're supposed to know. Perhaps as the regulator, you get to have everything. You get to do that in a traditional way. You have to do that in a blockchain-y sort of way where it's confusing. And blockchains in general are not terribly good at compartmentalization. It's not what they're built for. So what's really good at compartmentalization is the systems that we've been using since the 70s. So we use those for compartmentalization. We use the blockchain to ensure consistency between them where that's necessary.
Yeah, and I guess just to add one more point to that, John and Boris, this isn't speaking specifically to what you're talking about. If there's any specifics, happy to take that offline. But essentially, if you take a look at the baseline protocol, the reference architecture that the Radish 34 provides, you can see that that's where the verifier and the shield contracts that handles some of the permissioning that John was talking about. So who needs to see it, at what step they need to see it, that's all addressed in there. Okay,
thank you.
So there's a question from Floris about what's visible on the blockchain, and Kyle shared the link to Etherscan in chat. I don't know if we want to address that specifically or It's up to you. Leave it to the
Yeah.
chat.
Yeah, happy to talk about it.
There's a question from Roberto. At the data integration level, how are data models mapped? Is there a reference model that is targeted by any system that is baselined, or is it done for each integration system to system?
Yeah, excellent question. And this is exactly what we did with the domain model for this demo scope. And of course, the reference model itself should be established data standards on business process level that are already established by different ERPs. So if we stay in the SAP world, we have some kind of standards like iDocs, or we have ADFAC standards or like X12 standards. So as the use cases grow for business flows that have to be baselined, it will be even more important to rely on these common data models. And for example, what we do at Unibright is to help mapping to these actual data models, because this is always a huge part of the work. If you talk to another system that somehow has the same standard, but in the details is not, and then you have to map on, say, item level or attribute level. So the reference model is exactly what should be in place so that baselining is easier at the end of the day.
Yeah, effectively, wouldn't you say, Stefan, that this is not a new pattern? This is sometimes people are, they're like, oh, well, this is innovation. This is the future. I'm like, oh, no, actually, it's the past. The pattern we've been using for years and years in middleware. The only real difference is we're saying, hey, there's, we're instead of using a common frame of reference that we set up, as a new silo for making these different systems work together, we're just saying, yeah, no, there's this always on silo that's out there. And then we just have to make sure that we use that in a way that isn't giving up sensitive information, even in the metadata about who we are, what our activities are, who our relationships are with whom, right? So that's
exactly. And baseline is just the perfect example for a different approach on how to understand a mainnet, like not understand it just as a public available database to put all your data on a blockchain, which makes no sense. It's also a different understanding than just having that big one world computer that does every business logic in smart contracts. There are partial use cases where this still could make sense. And we are also happy to address them at our daily work, but the baseline pattern just sees the mainnet as a common frame of reference and as a message bus, like every middleware integration component would do, but with very handy arguments like that it's always on, that it's publicly available, that everybody can access it and use it with pay-per-use. This is promising for a middleware bus.
And resist tampering too, right? So
yeah.
And I think that there's another important note to mention here is, as Stefan didn't get a chance to show the SAP side, right? But as we were showing the Dynamics 365, again, we're just talking about the user experience over here. You don't have to gut out your entire system and implement a system that's the same as all the other systems that you want to do business with, right? So one of the things that I was trying to share with the Dynamics 365 objects, with one was the procurement and sourcing and one was the sales and marketing modules. Those are specific to the D365 worlds, right? You don't have to get something that matches the SAP side, right? So the SAP side, they have their modules, keep that. Dynamics as their side, you keep that, and then you can work internally with the data reporting layers is what you were talking about, and use that for what you need internally without having to feel like, you have to change things up or you have to share any sensitive information, which I think is pretty cool.
And Daniel, on that, there's a whole industry around connectors, or not connectors, but translating. So middleware as translator. So that'll be an interesting thing to see. You guys did that manually here, right? But you could be using Del Boomi or other translation systems in the middle of this as well, right?
Well, it's not that we did it manually. We just utilized the out-of-the-box service operations that Dynamics has. So it's making all these calls based on information which comes in and out of the proxy.
There's another question in chat here from Reginald. What are the biggest risks and challenges of the baseline integration into existing systems?
Kyle?
Yes, I think it's about really understanding the use case and designing a circuit, a zero knowledge circuit that really fits that use case. I think all the other problems are well understood.
What about ports or messages in and out? There's a lot of companies I've worked with and for are pretty particular about what goes in, what goes out, and in what order. Sometimes you can only do outbounds, right? So there's whole issues there. In terms of integration security, where are we at?
So I think we've made some design decisions, sort of like as a group, in terms of adopting NATs sort of at the core messaging layer to really provide a good distinction or delineation between what happens on chain and what happens point to point. And so I think there's actually some pretty mature tools that we're making good use of. To make this very, very enterprise friendly. I think NATS is one of the most enterprise friendly tools you'll see for messaging, and we're leveraging that. So yeah, I think that all that's mitigated.
So you're not opening up a bunch of new ports or anything like that.
No, exactly. No ports.
Another question from Jorg. Can the baseline proofs in any way be found in the respective ERPs, or is there nothing sent back to the ERPs?
I was actually answering that one, and I was in the process. Go ahead, Stefan.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that there are different approaches to this. So, for example, like it was shown in the Dynamics environment by Daniel and team. Of course, it would be also easy to extend the user interface where you do all the configuration and perhaps have some check back possibilities on certain business objects. The way that we do it at Unibright or also at the SAP level would be to have this logic within the connector, or as we call it, the Explorer, where you can pull together information from your ERP system that holds the actual state and all the business objects, and then additionally read, for example, data from the blockchain, or do the proof again to show that the object that you just received and show in your SAP has the same proof as the one that you sent to your counterparty. So there are different takes on that, and it also depends a little bit on what the customer wants, and that's why there are integration and connection and translation companies to fulfill all these needs as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. I also think it makes a lot of sense to have it in the connector layer, just because to handle race conditions and just locking around the Merkle tree and the root that you need to base your next commitment on.
I agree.
So we've run a little long today. Normally office hours for those of you that are interested to join us next time are scheduled for 30 minutes, but given the nature of the content and the value of the presentation, appreciate your patience and sticking with us. John, do you want to kick off any last comments, or we don't have any more questions filtering through, so
I think this is a fantastic session. Thanks, everybody. Same time next week, we'll be doing this. Let us know on the Slack or wherever if you have topics that you want us to cover or go deeper on some things. There should be a pretty neat demo next week from another team doing a different kind of integration, more for small companies working with big companies, either next week or the week after. So lots coming, and please get involved.
And just take a moment of gratitude for the entire team that put this together. Kyle and the folks at Provide, Dan and Jason at Envision, Stefan and the team at Unibright. Really fantastic collaborative effort and a great representation of what's possible with Baseline. Thank you.
Also great help from Microsoft and SAP on advisement.
Absolutely. Takes a village. Thanks, everybody.
Cheers.
Thanks,
See you, everyone. Bye.